It's Jess. Welcome back to the Not Carrie Bradshaw YouTube channel. In this video, I am recapping episode 4 of I May Destroy You. Trigger warning, I am going to be discussing themes of sexual assault and rape and consent. So if those are topics that you're not in a great place to explore or to hear about, now's a good time to dip on out. I will not take it personally, and thank you for trying. Don't feel bad. Take care of yourself. This episode was very traumatic and violent and discouraging. Like, things like what happened in this episode make you lose faith in people. It was really hard to watch, which is why I'm a little bit late with this review, because I wanted to consult with friends of mine who are part of the LGBTQIA community. I also wanted to consult with friends of mine who are mental health professionals, because I wanted a little bit of insight into the mindset of a victim. I just want to make sure that I'm saying things that, obviously I want to give you guys my opinion and my thoughts and, you know, my 2 cents, but I also want to make sure that I'm saying things that honor and respect victims and that don't contribute to harmful stereotypes or anything like that. So that's why I'm late, and I hope you guys are okay with that. I would rather be late and give you good content than be earlier on time and say something that's not going to be productive. So let's get right into it. The episode opens with Arabella going to therapy. If you do not know, I am a huge advocate for mental health in all aspects. I love therapy. I wish that therapy was mandatory for all people. If I ever became president, I would legit find a way to make therapy mandatory for every person. And we could clearly see who would be opposed to that. Anyway, I love that Arabella's therapist is a Black woman. That seems to be an ongoing theme in TV these days, where everybody's therapist is a Black woman, and it kind of feeds into the trope about Black women just being wise, spiritual advisors. I think people at my day job even kind of treat me like that. Like, it's weird how people just kind of confide in you about things. Another conversation for another day. So Arabella is doing this thing that I find myself doing a lot in therapy, where you just want to move on. You just want to move past whatever your trauma is, and you tend to you want to rush your healing process, right? So she's doing this thing where when she starts to feel bad, when she starts to have what is basically PTSD from her sexual assault, she reminds herself that, like, there are people starving in the world. There's a war in Syria. Everyone doesn't have a smartphone. And her therapist is trying to remind her that when you constantly are trying to look at the bigger picture, you neglect the smaller picture, which is yourself. This is something that I think is a problem even outside of sexual assault. I think for people, period. We're just not conditioned to sit with negative emotions. Especially as a Christian. That's one of the things that I have a hard time with in church, is that you're always taught to kind of look on the bright side and don't let the bad feelings get you down. You're supposed to be sad sometimes in life. Life is not easy. So you can't ignore this whole other spectrum of human emotion and pretend or rationalize, which is what she's trying to do. You can't rationalize your way out of bad feelings, because they have a purpose. For me personally, things that I find extremely traumatizing or triggering, I do my best to try to actually sit in them. Not for a long time, but I don't like to talk myself out of my feelings. I don't like to talk myself out of bad feelings. That's why I find it really, really frustrating when you tell somebody, like, yeah, I'm sad, and they're like, oh, don't be sad. It's like, well, obviously, fool. But sometimes you are supposed to be. You sometimes have to face the things that trigger you so that they no longer have power over you. That's a part of processing trauma. That's a part of processing breakups or, heartbreak, is when you get the bad feeling in, that feeling that you get in your stomach. You can physically feel heartbreak, like, in your nervous system. When you get that feeling, instead of trying to, like, busy yourself with something, let it be there, so that, look at it, acknowledge it, so that it can move on. When you ignore it and you try to rationalize it, it manifests itself in other ways, which is what we saw with Arabella she goes to her childhood home and, looks for these crayons so that she can color. She wants to do all these activities just so that she can feel better. I personally did this maybe last year or year before last, where I was going through a breakup, for lack of a better word, and I just wanted to do anything and everything to make myself feel better because I just did not want to be heartbroken. It's just not fun. So I took myself to the spa. I took myself to a really expensive dinner. I bought myself new crystals. I went shopping. I was trying to do every activity just to shut down the bad feelings. I just didn't want to deal with them. And came back to bite me in the ass. So Arabella, and let me just tell y'all, coloring as an adult, super soothing. Get you a little Lisa Frank and some colored pencils and just give yourself an hour to just color. Soothing as hell. So she's, her therapist is, giving her ideas of things that she can do, even by herself, that don't have to involve another person, that can help her to feel better. So she's, kind of rushing the process of her healing from this very traumatic event. And we see that she ends up having sex with the guy, what was his name? Zane, who her publishers or her, agents hired to help her finish this story. And again, this is reflective of her previous, of Michaela Cole's real life, where she was writing the second season of Chewing Gum, and the producers or whatever forced her to finish this. There was no actual time away. She couldn't get a vacation to process things. So they hired this guy to help her. I was I wanted to be sure that I was on the right track about why she did this. If you just experienced a sexual assault, you would think you don't want anyone to touch you forever. What it actually is she's trying to exercise control over her life again. She was very out of control when she was raped, in that she kind of wasn't even fully conscious. So now she's trying to exercise control over her body and exercise agency over her body. This is where we get into the nuance of consent. I think this whole episode was a juxtaposition between overt, explicit consent and implied consent. With Arabella, she, again, it's almost like she's recreating the situation, which my friend who is a mental health professional told me sometimes even from our childhood, we experience trauma and we will subconsciously recreate that situation just so that we can make it end in a way that makes us feel better. And that's why we end up repeating certain patterns over and over again, because there's something that we're missing and we have not quite learned yet how to actually cope with and process whatever that trauma was. So she's having sex with this guy. She clearly asked if he had a condom, so she clearly expressed wanting to use protection. He took the condom off midway through the sex, and I gasped so loud because I was like, no, she's being violated again. Some people do not realize that that is sexual assault. That is not okay. If just because a person agrees to have sex with you does not mean that you can then do whatever you want to from that point. People agree to have a certain kind of sex with you. You don't get to change you don't get to change what that sex is midway through. If you did not ask permission to take the condom off and you just did it on your own, that is sexual assault. I did not consent to having unprotected sex with you. That's not okay. And upon realizing it, I was surprised that she didn't react more. She was just like, oh, now we have to get a morning after pill. I'd had to air it out. We would have been fighting. It would have been some furniture moving. You don't do that to people. And I really want more people to understand you can consent to a certain kind of sex. And if a person changes what that is midway through, that shit ain't okay. There was a conversation on Twitter a while ago where people were really trying to argue that that was an okay thing to do. And it's no, there's a huge difference between consenting to have protected and unprotected sex. Absolutely not. So that was completely devastating to me, because in his mind, I guess he felt like it was implied that it was okay for him to take off the condom. And it's nope, you made that up. You decided that on your own. That was not a conversation that you had. And I think a part of the benefit of people having less traditional sex like BDSM is that it requires participants to have a very clear conversation about what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. There are ground rules for everyone's safety, and not only physically but also mentally and spiritually. Like, you need to be in a safe space in order to have sex. It's a very personal and intimate thing. Even if you're a person who can like have sex without any emotion, it's still a very intimate and personal thing, and you need to feel safe to do it. So I think that sometimes when it's more traditional sex between a man and a woman, there are all these things that are just implied by the way that we're socialized, and those are the things that we have to break down. We have to unlearn so much about the way we've been taught to engage in sexual activity. Which brings me to Kwame's situation. Kwame is out here doing his thing. He's on dating apps. He gets it in at the grocery store. And initially I was like, now I'm all for, I want this to be a sex positive space, and I'm all for, do you. And one of my friends was like, that to me is the behavior of someone who doesn't love themselves. And I wanted to judge Kwame for that, but then I had to think about the fact that he also expressed that, his father's visiting, and was his father from Ghana, I think, and he comes from a more traditional or conservative family where like they know that he's gay, but they aren't necessarily accepting of it. So it's not like he can have sex at his house. He doesn't live alone. So I think when we put people in positions where they can't be themselves completely, you create a vulnerability, and they end up doing things that are a little bit more high risk than a person who, does have their own home and can, pick and choose when and where they're gonna have sex. So that to me, again, I don't know, maybe he just is a sexually adventurous person who I'm gonna get it in wherever I'm gonna get it in with whomever and just move on with my day. Or maybe it's just a lack of support where he has more control over his environment and where he can engage in those things. So this guy who seems to be curious at most, my friend was saying that he thinks the guy is either bi or fluid and just kind of trying to figure out where he falls on the spectrum of sexuality. So the guy is kind of not sure what he wants to do with Kwame, but he does feel like he's interested in him. And what I still am confused about is why the guy was willing to participate if they had a third, as opposed to just hanging out one-on-one. But it was also like, once again, where are we gonna hang out? Because you can't come in here like with my folks, and you seem to not fully be aware or certain of where you are sexually. So he finds this guy who agrees to be their third. They're hanging out at the guy's apartment, and he very clearly says, I don't do bareback. I don't have unprotected sex with people. And the guy who's kind of uncertain about like what he wants to do, whether or not he wants to be there, leaves, because I guess he decides that he doesn't. And this is where shit got super violent and super traumatic. As Kwame was leaving, when that guy closed that door, I was like, something is about to happen. I just knew it. Kwame opened the door to leave, and the guy closed it behind him. And it happened so fast, but also so slow, that this guy fully raped him. He said he didn't want to have unprotected sex, and the guy still did it. And what made it even more horrifying to me was that the guy, I don't think, really saw anything wrong. He was like kind of smiling about it. As Kwame was leaving, and he was visibly upset, and he was just like, okay, see, that was horrifying to me, because people who lack self-awareness really scare me anyway. But for him to have, he was so imposing. He was a really big guy, and I felt horrible for Kwame. Horrible. I mean, I was devastated after that scene. Like, I was devastated. And a part of me is like, well, when you are out here having sex with strangers, this is the risk that you run. But when we look statistically, that most sexual assaults, 8 out of 10 sexual assaults, the victim knew the person. it gets a little bit shaky. Sure, it's more risky, you know, if you don't know the person, but you'd be surprised at the people that you probably actually know and talk to often who have done something in the realm of sexual assault. And I just felt bad that the other guy left, because maybe it wouldn't have happened had that other guy still been there. And a part of me was mad at him, you know, like, which, you know, kind of wasn't rational. So Kwame leaves, and he, you know, calls Arabella, but he doesn't quite want to tell her what happened. And I think that's just a part of not wanting to be a victim. I was talking to, you know, my friend, because I'm just like, talk to me about like how common this might be like in the gay community. Is it common for a person who's curious and doesn't quite know where they fall on the spectrum to be a third? And, you know, he was like, yeah, that is some people's tea. Like, some people are just trying to figure it out and will just, you know, kind of watch like in a voyeuristic way to see what they would want to do, if anything. And we should be able to live in a world where we can just do what we want to do without concern for our safety, right? And I was having this conversation with my therapist the other day, because I met a guy maybe last week or the week before, and he seemed like a perfectly nice, normal, very attractive guy. I gave him my phone number, and this guy literally called my phone 10 times between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. And I had just met him maybe 6 hours ago. And I was telling my therapist, like, I didn't want to go to the park now because I'm scared I'm going to run into him. And I really hate that women have to do so much to accommodate other people's damage. To, you know, the fact that it's summer and I still will wrap a jacket around my waist because I don't want the attention of like wearing workout pants and walking down the block in Brooklyn where people feel like that gives them permission to say or to do certain things. And it sucks that it feels like you have to do so much to accommodate other people, and it's not fair. And my therapist was saying, don't look at it as accommodating other people, but look at it as a means to protect yourself. Make it more about you. This is what you're having to do so that you can navigate the world safely. And I think for Kwame, it's not his fault that this guy is basically a sexual predator. He should be able to, you know, engage in whatever kind of consensual sex he wants to without fear that a person is going to do that to him. And you know, you have to ask yourself, do you want to operate or navigate the world as it should be or as it is? And that's really hard because, you know, we should be able to do, you know, just live how you want to. But there are so many people who have just this damage, you know, and feel like they have this say-so over other people's bodies, and it just doesn't end up being that clean. So that really, really devastated me. And I think, like I said, nobody wants to be a victim. Nobody wants to admit that they were that out of control of their lives. And I think that even happens when we look at how we navigate the world as Black people, and you look at people who kind of fall into the respectability politics thing where it's like, well, if you get an education and if you dress well and if you speak well, then you won't be killed by the police. You won't da-da-da. And none of that is true, but it's because people don't want to accept the lack of control that they sometimes have over their lives, that sometimes bad things happen to good people or to people who are just trying to live their lives. It's hard to accept. It's hard to accept some of the horrors that exist in the world. And I think that's why he didn't want to, you know, come out and tell Arabella, like, this thing just happened to me. And maybe he was also trying to be considerate of what she's actually going through right now. But I was so confused and a little bit angry at how she was like kikiing with Zane after he completely violated her. But again, I don't think Arabella wants to be a victim again. I don't think that she wants to admit that something like that happened to her again. That's really, really hard and really, really heavy. And I just felt for her. Because I think in both of their situations, they're trying to rationalize why it was okay. maybe they didn't mean to, maybe it really was just a misunderstanding, whatever, and you can see Kwame trying to process and trying to figure out like what his next move will be. So I was looking at previews for the next episode. It looks like he is going to go and report things, and it also looks like there is something sketch about Kwame, and that not Kwame, Zane, and this may really just be his MO with women as a whole. So we'll see what happens. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes to make sure that I covered everything that I wanted to. I also want to say that I really enjoy this show for showing the fact that no is not always enough. I think my generation, at least, we were really raised with the no means no, and that was it. But there is so much more involved in consent beyond no means no. You have to get into the way that like women are socialized to play hard to get, to not come off as easy. So, you know, dudes will hear no thinking that you want to be coerced, thinking that you want to be persuaded. And that's where things get murky. Like, we have so much to unlearn just about the way that we engage in dating and in sexual activity. And now I'm speaking heteronormatively because I can only speak from my own experience, and obviously we can see that this happens in the gay community. And the friend who I spoke to had a very similar situation happen to him, and he was like, you know, some people really think that that's hot. They want to be dominated like that, but that guy knew that what he was doing was wrong. This is what my friend was telling me. So I'm hoping that more people can tolerate this show, so that and when I say tolerate, I mean not be so triggered as to not be able to push through and to understand how the nuances of consent work, that it's so much more than no means no. It's so much more even than, you know, explicitly saying I'm not okay with this, but you can do this. That sometimes people just do not care and feel like they have ownership of your body. That's really scary. So I'm sorry this review isn't funny. I just felt like it was a conversation that we needed to have so that we can start exploring more of how to get to a safer and healthier place when it comes to sexual consent. So we'll see what happens next episode. Again, sorry this wasn't funny. I didn't think there was anything funny about this episode. I legit had to call my friend right after and was like, bitch, did you see what just happened? Like, it broke my heart. So like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things. I'm sending you guys positive vibes, and for those who this was triggering for and you still watch this video, thank you, and I hope you're taking care of yourself and that maybe this is helping you to process some things of your own. So I'll talk to you guys later, and sorry for being late again. Okay, bye.